Welcome to the CyberSangha podcast. CyberSangha is a program of free live broadcasts, launched in 2009 by renowned teacher and author Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. Join us as we draw on ancient Tibetan wisdom to discover how to connect with our best self and live to our highest potential. The following conversation, The Life of a Tulku, a conversation with Tulku Jorge René, happened on December 7th, 2024, as a science and spirituality dialogue with Tulku Jorge René and Alejandro Chaoul. This was part of a year-long series of dialogues from 2024. This content is for informational purposes only. Listeners should consult medical professionals for any physical or mental health concerns. Please use headphones and do not meditate while driving or operating machinery.
Welcome everyone to CyberSangha. My name is Alejandro Chaoul and I'll be your host today. I'm so excited to have Tulku Jorge René with us. And before I introduce him, I would like to say a few words about CyberSangha for those of you who are new to this space. This is a fantastic space that was created by Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. And as I many times say, this was even before COVID. He had this idea that why don't we use technology in a way that creates a sangha, that creates a community. And through that community, as many of you know and benefit from, he brings teachings. We have a 24-hour full moon meditation every month that is coming up, and different teachings, and including teachings in Tibetan, and also these dialogues. Sometimes there's dialogues like this, with one specific person. Sometimes we have two. We have dialogues. We have science and spirituality, and different topics that we think will be of interest to you. So today I'm and I want to not forget of all the people that are behind to make this happen, from Milos, who's our technology guru, to Poli, who's behind the scenes, making a lot of things happen, the people in the chat and so forth. So thank you, everyone. So today we called it The Life of a Tulku. And for those of you who don't know what Tulku is, and maybe I'll ask Jorge René in a minute, but it's in a nutshell is the word for reincarnation, for a reincarnated Lama or a reincarnated teacher in the Tibetan tradition. And so Jorge René actually was born in Chihuahua, Mexico, back in 96. He was born as Jorge René Valle Sandoval, and he was recognized as the reincarnation of an incredible master called Yongdrung Bön Tenzin, who actually passed away in 1978. And we'll take you a little bit through the story of how he was recognized, and how the teachers of Yongdrung Bön Tenzin, so Yongdrung Tenzin Namdak and Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and His Holiness Lumto Tempanima were really crucial to bring Jorge René into his tulkuhood, if I may use that word. And from the young age, I've been very fortunate to be very involved in this part of his life where his parents, Jorge and Katy, from Chihuahua, we were communicating. I was translating for them with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and it was all on the phone. We didn't have Zoom at that time. And anyway, so lots of interesting stories that may come in the weaving of today's dialogue. But most importantly, Jorge René started going back and forth from Mexico to India in Menri Monastery, to Nepal, Triten Norbutse, and also got involved in the Lotsawa Rinchen Sampo translation program. He was also for some time in Lishu. And so he's now fluent not only in his native language, Spanish, but English and Tibetan. And he's really dedicated to preserving and sharing the wisdom of this Yungdrung Bön tradition. And he's really unique in this bridge between East and West. So, Tulku, welcome. If I have a kata, I would offer it to you right
Thank
here.
you, Ale.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here to share with all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I see that you are back in Chihuahua and you just came back from Nepal, correct?
Yeah, I came back about a week ago. So I'm here in my home in Chaoul.
Excellent, excellent. So maybe let's start with that, and then we'll go back to your young age. But so tell us a little bit, what were you doing? What you were doing in Nepal?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, I made a decision to spend 3 years in one monastery, very big monastery that we have in Nepal, Triten Norbutse Monastery. And so the idea that I've always had is kind of, I've always wanted to replicate, the studies, the curriculum that the monks follow in these institutions. And so I tried to kind of adopt the curriculum to my needs, so to speak, and especially since the curriculum that the monks go through, it's quite long. It's at least 13 years, the whole curriculum, and then they end up with the equivalent of a PhD in Buddhist philosophy. So my idea was always to kind of get all the knowledge that the monks get at the monastery. And so three years is what I decided to go with. So 2 years have passed already, and so I have been having teachings with one monk, one teacher, one-to-one teachings. We go over the text in Tibetan. Everything is in Tibetan, and then I kind of ask questions or read text again and again. And I'm doing translations of those texts. And then besides that, I also read a lot, mainly in English, books that are kind of related to these issues, but that have been made in English. And then I also kind of started to become more immersed in my own practice, my own meditation, kind of more disciplined, more focused. And so I'm very happy. It's been 2 years. I think that my knowledge, both intellectually and kind of experientially, has developed. And so yeah, I'm very happy. So yeah, I came back one week ago for the holidays, and then I will be back in Nepal at the beginning of January. There's a big ceremony going on in February, and so we'll be back for that and staying at least one more year.
Wonderful. So for many that are in Tibetan traditions, it seems maybe similar to the 3-year retreat, right? That some people do. So you have this period of time where you're really immersed. So it's wonderful that you're doing that. So let's maybe go back, 20 some years ago, I wonder, and I think some people wonder too. What do you remember? What do you remember, for example, from the year 2000 when Rinpoche, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, that is, did a retreat for the millennium, and you and your parents came, and many of us came, and amongst part of the retreat is the time that you were enthroned. And I remember you as a young kid on the throne with so many katas that will almost cover you. So do you have any recollection, whether it's intellectual or feeling, anything from that?
I have very vague memories. For example, I kind of remember very vaguely, when we arrive at Menri in India, and all the people were kind of in line with the katas, and the kind of some vague experiences, not very very lucid. But then of the ceremony, I don't remember anything, mostly. And I remember part of the ceremony in not in Menri but in Triten in Nepal, the other monastery. And I remember very well. I don't know why, that I was eating one candy that we have here in Mexico. It's called Reyerindo. I remember so neatly that I was, so covered with all the chili and so on, and that my mother and Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche were kind of washing me. That memory is very lucid. I don't know why. And yeah, but the ceremonies, not so much.
Okay.
I was 3 years old at that time, and yeah, it's kind of difficult to remember.
Of course. And we actually went to Pokhara also, and so. And what about further back? Do you have memories of your past life, or of your life as Lopan Sangye Tenzin, Yongtsin Sangye Tenzin?
No, I don't.
How do you feel?
Many people ask me that question, hoping that I have a lot of memories and these things, but fortunately, I don't.
Uh-huh. And how do you feel your relationship with him?
I mean, I feel very connected. I'll always feel very connected to the tradition. I feel part of me. I feel home. In all these teachings and kind of very familiar. It's when you start to see how reality is, and how all your experiences are kind of seen through these lenses of all this knowledge that is in these teachings. Many of the teachings and of the points of view are, philosophical points of view are kind of very counterintuitive, right? I think that most people would say that they're very counterintuitive, but I've always find them quite the opposite. Quite intuitive for me, and kind of always felt like I've kind of coming back to a past knowledge that I've had before, kind of remembering all those things and making sense. It's hard for me to find something that it's within the tradition. I mean, that it's hard for me to make sense. Basically, it's completely opposite. I start reading all these things that conventionally you would say that are very counterintuitive, especially Dzogchen teachings and kind of like the whole framework that Bön or Buddhism it's in it, and for me it's always been quite intuitive, quite making sense, and so I always feel like an insider, like at home, yeah. And with the Tibetan tradition, I've always been fascinated by his tradition. I've been sharing with them most of my life, their customs, their beliefs, and yeah, I mean I always felt so connected to the tradition, with the people, their customs. Yeah. So you can say that there is a connection, yeah.
Yeah, no, clearly.
And then again, if I may add, sure. One of the main deities that Lopan Sangye Tenzin was kind of fond of, or kind of his particular deity, was Sipijalmo. And I've always felt, quite connected with Sipijalmo. I also considered him to be my main deity, and always kind of felt very empowerment by her blessings. When I chant, the prayers and so on, I got filled with a lot of joy, a lot of connection, and so I think that is a peculiar thing, that it was also his main deity. This is why a clear connection that I can see.
Beautiful. And when you went to his house in Menri Monastery, and that big prayer wheel there, any experiences there?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a few times to his home. Every time that I go to Menri, I try to visit it, and I think when I was a kid, and the first time that I went there, it was more like like feeling like there's a lot of new things, right? Because I was a kid and all these things, but then as I was growing up, and then always coming back to the house, I always felt more and more connected, to the energy. Always I always try to do a small meditation, small practice, and it's always quite. It's always easy for me to connect. There's sometimes that in the meditation it becomes difficult. There's some predispositions that you have, or some conditionings that are going on in your life, and that kind of that obstructs you from that lucidity. But in that house, I always felt quite that it comes very easy. It doesn't. I don't need to pay a lot of effort to get into the natural state, and so it's always been nice.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. So I remember in 98. So in 98, you and your parents came to New Mexico, and Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche was doing a retreat with Yongtsin Tenzin Namdak, and you all came, and there were a number of interesting things that happened then. But I want to go into one of the moments that I found was very tender, and I don't know if you remember or you have any feelings of that, which was when you were with Lopun, with Yongtsin Tenzin Namdak, and he was giving you almonds, and you would grab the almonds and put them back in his mouth. I don't know if you remember that. It was such a special moment. Any feelings of any of that?
I have no memories of those moments.
Okay. And you know that it was very interesting because, as some of you know, in Ligmincha we do auctions sometimes, and that week we had auction, actually a text that I had that I received, and I had it on my table. And when you and your parents arrived, they didn't have a room for whatever. Anyways, not to make a long story of this, but basically you slept in that room, and your mom was saying that you would wake up, you were trying to reach up to that text. And I asked Yongdrung Rinpoche, I said, look, Rinpoche, what is this text? And I said, you said it was yours. He said it was mine, but actually it was given to me by Yongtsin Sangye Tenzin. So you were reaching out back to your text. So as some people know this, right? And there's movies on the reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and so forth, where you recognize different objects of your teachers. Did you have any of that?
Yeah. This is a big tradition, in Tibet, that when a tulku is recognized, it's always this kind of, how could we say it, like a test, so to speak. And when with the kid, with the starts to recognizing, they put different, like 3 or 4 bells, and then he has to choose one out of the 4, and then it's usually they kind of pick the bells or the instruments that they belong to them in their past lives. And for me, they never did that. I don't know why. Now that you're asking me, I've never asked Lama Tenzin or Yongdrung Rinpoche why, but yeah, they never made me choose. They mentioned something like the signs were kind of very clear, and that's being why there was no need to do all these things. But I find it quite intrigues me, like I didn't have to go through all these tests. which is usually a tradition, right?
Right. So that one was spontaneous. No one was testing you. You just went into it.
Yeah, basically.
But
yeah.
you passed. So let me ask you about you. You know that one of the main ways that you were recognized was through dreams.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the audience a little bit of that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the main person here that kind of was the instrument for the recognition was Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. He was one of the main disciples of Lopon Sanche Tenzin, and he started having he when he first came to Chihuahua, to our place, it was in '95, so 1 year before I was born. And then he came back on the '96, on September '96, so 1 month after I was born. And then, so he always, the way he tells the story is that, after the first year that he came, he started having dreams and kind of very visions in which, his Lopon Sanche Tenzin, his teacher, kind of appeared to him in very unusual ways, such as dressed as in, Western clothing. And then he also had another dream that he was walking with his teacher in kind of a neighborhood, and he says that the houses were kind of Western architecture, so he could tell that he was not in Tibet or in India. So quite unusual dreams. And then there's one dream that it's kind of became quite clear, which is actually connected with the past experience that he had, when he was a kid. And he was attending the teachings of Lopon Sanche Tenzin back in the 70s, and he was quite young. So the teacher asked all of the disciples to go to home and then sleep, and then that the next day they will all were going to share their dreams. He was going to decide if they were kind of ready, if their intellect was kind of fully acute, so that they could receive this quite important teachings. And then, so the dream that Tenzin Wangyal had, it was that he was a bus
Conductor.
the bus that the one that checks your ticket, and that he saw one Dakiri or one deity, I think, and that he gave him that the ticket was on a Tibetan A, which is the last letter of the Tibetan alphabet, but it's also very, it has a lot of connotation within practice, right? We use it for visualization and chanting. So it's the most important letter of the alphabet. It has a lot of meaning, and so for him was quite meaningful. And then, so later on, 30 years later, something like that, he had the same dream, but this time it wasn't a deed. It was Lopon Sanche Tenzin himself, getting into the bus and giving him the ticket with the A. And so so he had these dreams. And then there was also one dream by one friend of us, of the family, Laura Sotelo, that she also had a few dreams in which I was with Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, and I don't remember much this dream, but I think that we were kind of walking towards each other. And then he said that at the beginning I was kind of, one of my legs didn't work quite well, and then as I become to approach Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, it's kind of my legs start to work very well, until we were almost kind of facing each other, and I was able to walk completely normal. And so you have all these dreams. I don't know about the dreams of Yungdrung Rinpoche or Menri Tizin, to be honest. But they when Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche had these dreams, these visions in his meditation and so on, he kind of requested, right, to Yungdrung Rinpoche and Menri Tizin to kind of confirm all the signs, and that they engage in their own meditation, their own visions, their own dreams, to kind of confirm. And so they all did, and for them was quite clear. I'm sorry that I've not been able to share what were those dreams or those visions about, because I don't know. Perhaps I will ask one day Yungdrung Rinpoche.
Great. I can tell you that in 97,
Yeah,
again, there were no phones and the
the phones.
photos were not easily sent by email and so forth. And so, for whatever reason, Rinpoche couldn't travel to Nepal. And so, uh,
Hmm.
Erika, my wife and I we're going to Nepal. And so Rinpoche gave us these photos of you and to show Lupin. And
Oh yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
we were there and showed, and he looked and he okay. He didn't say yes or he was like I call it a little bit like a poker face, right? He was like
Yeah,
okay, but it
we'll
was
see.
clear exactly, and then he communicated with Rinpoche. And at that time, actually, it wasn't. Rinpoche was not revealing that it was specifically Lopun Sangye Tenzin, but he said a special a special person, and then it was revealed. So this is wonderful, and it's been, I mean, for me and for I think the sangha in general, it's been beautiful to see how you've been growing into this tulkuhood, and also it's been great to see the relationship between the Tibetan tradition and the Western tradition. And maybe one thing that I think is quite particular, would like to hear more about, which is that if I understand well, both Lopun and Rinpoche were very supportive of you finishing Western education as well.
Yeah,
And so if you can say a little bit more of that and how that interweaved with the Tibetan education.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so the Tibetans are quite of immersed in their own culture, right? And I mean, as we all are kind of very immersed in the culture that we are born, with all the predispositions that this entails and so on. And so the Tibetan culture is quite devout. They're quite devout people, and when a tulku is born, usually traditionally they kind of the child goes into the monastery at a very young age, 2 3 years old, and then he starts all his education. And the parents are quite uh how can I say, like, they're quite happy to do it, to deliver the child to. I mean, of course they can visit and so on, but it's basically leaving the child into as I said, 3 years old, completely, living with the monks and having a different education, specific education and so on. So it's quite you know as we're hearing these things in the West, it kind of sounds very strange for us, but for them it's quite natural, right? It's again, they are kind of predisposed to these cultures, and for them it's kind of natural. And of course, with me and my parents, uh, my mother, she never kind of wanted to do this. She wanted to, especially, she's a Mexican mom. And so yeah, so they because yeah, when I was 2 3 years old, Yongdrung Rinpoche and Tenzin Wangyal spoke with my parents and say, okay, we need to discuss, what is going to happen with the child. You have to send it to the monasteries. You have to receive a proper education and all those things. And then my parents were like, uh, they always felt, since the moment they met Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, hear the Bonpa teachings, they connected very naturally, spontaneously with the tradition. They kind of felt it at home, like almost as if finding something you were looking for. Um, and then so they were quite open, to uh, when they received the news. I'm sure that it was a shock. I mean, I could certainly tell. But again, as I said, because they were so connected with the tradition, they felt like, oh, okay, so let's just take it slow. And then, again, spoken with Yongdrung Rinpoche, saying, okay, what is going to be the education? So they decided to kind of taking me to India and Nepal, to the monasteries every time, like once or 2 months every year. And then when I was staying here in Chihuahua, in Mexico, continuing my Western education, some monks from the monastery also came to our home here. And then, so that is why I kind of continue also my, at that time I was 5-6 years old. So it was mostly, Tibetan language, but it was always this, going back and forth, and always, the decision was made of, again, finish first, doing my Western study, but again, without leaving that part, always letting the monks come, and always, going to retreats in Virginia or in New Mexico, in Torreon, Mexico City, and then also going in Nepal and in India to the monasteries. And so I think that this approach was quite good. I've heard stories about another Western Tulkus. There aren't a lot, but there are a few, and there are some who kind of take the traditional Tibetan education and kind of they went to the monastery at a very young age. But many of them kind of when they grew up and they become teenagers, they kind of wanted to disassociate themselves with all this, and they kind of wanted to come back to the West, almost like, I think, because I can relate in a few things that that they kind of felt that they kind of lost their childhood, right? Because the study in the monastery is quite rigorous and quite strict. They have a lot of classes every day. They have to debate, and it's quite. I mean, for a child, especially for a child, it's quite a lot. It can be certainly can be overwhelming. And so I think that this approach was very good. When I was 12, when I was 9, I spoke with Yungdrung Bön, and he said, okay, what about when you turn 12 and you finish middle school? And before high school, you go to Menri 1 year and you spend there studying Tibetan. And then, so I agree. And so I went when I was 12. The first time that I went, that I spent there so long, one whole year, and that I went alone without my parents. And then, but yeah, I mean, overall, I think that this approach, was, not nowadays that I think about it, I would, reflecting a little bit, I kind of think that, I would have I think, because of the knowledge that I have right now, right, that I would have appreciated more if, my parents were kind of a bit more strict and kind of letting me stay more months. And for example, when I was studying one year when I was 12, my mother wanted for me to go to because I have special classes with one monk, but my mother wanted for me to go to the actual school, where all the kids go to the school to receive math and history, and all these kind of general classes that we all had. And at that time, I didn't want, because I was quite shy and all these things. And now reflecting back, I say, I would have kind of want my mom to be more strict and say, no, I'm going to make you do all these things. But again, I'm talking from my perspective right now, And so who knows if it were like that before, if the same outcome that I have right now would end. So I'm kind of happy to do this, how they all handle the situation, kind of waiting, always asking me, what is it that you want? They never forced me to anything. I've always felt the freedom of choosing. So yeah, I'm very happy with the approach. I think that it was the best approach that we could take. Kind of keep a balance between the two worlds. And so yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your Western education. What did you study? You went to after high school. You went to the university, and in Mexico. Tell us a little bit of what you studied. What drew you to that, and so forth.
Yeah, I went to. So yeah, I spent almost 3 years in Lhotsaur and Chisampo learning Tibetan, and then when I came back, it's when I continue my studies in my Western education. So I decided to go to. I've always liked math and numbers, and so I went for financial administration. And yeah, but I mean, I've always, I decided to study that career because it was kind of connected with economics and things that I kind of liked. But if you ask me what is it that I really like, it's more oriented towards social studies like philosophy, psychology, even physics, and all those things. So in the future, I want to deepen my knowledge of this specific subject. Western philosophy, Western psychology, to kind of integrate all these things with the Bonpo Buddhist part. So that is one of the plans that I have in the future, also to get further studies in these fields.
Great. Now, philosophy is something that, at least from the Bonpo tradition, from the Tibetan tradition, you've been studying quite deeply, as you mentioned. And
Yeah.
in fact, you're starting to teach. You recently started teaching in Shenton Darjeeling's academy. For
Yeah.
those who don't know, Shenton Darjeeling is a Bonpo center founded by Yongzin Tenzin Namdak and Khenpo Tempa Yungdrung in Bleu in France. So tell us a little more about the course and about you being in Shenton and so forth.
Yeah, so this new academy, it's called Shenton Academy, it's just started, with my course. There is also another course going on, but it's just started. And so the idea was to kind of bring these teachings to a more academic, kind of like following a curriculum or more academically oriented way of teaching all these things. So, and then Wolfgang, which is one of the main, who came with the idea actually, he asked me about the idea that he had and if I wanted to be part of it. And then, so I agreed. And so my idea with this course was kind of an introduction for the Bon tradition, in terms of, philosophically oriented, right? Because, when people ask me, what is Bon or what is Buddhism, it's very hard, I find it very hard to describe it, because I think that all the words that we can use are kind of fall short of describing the whole tradition. For example, most people will say that it is a religion, right? But then I would say that the word religion doesn't doesn't encapsulate what the whole tradition has to offer, right? Because there are certainly things that are not religious, right? There are certain things that are kind of philosophically, psychologically, and so I try to give the approach to this tradition from a more philosophically oriented point of view, especially since I think that nowadays people are kind of more interested in. I see a lot of people very skeptical about many things, and so I myself, I'm also a very skeptical person. So I like to teach things kind of very neatly, but with a kind of system, following a system, a gradual system. And especially since we find in this tradition very, again, as I said at the beginning, quite counterintuitive teachings that that you heard about it, and because you are because you have been so predisposed all your life, so conditioned by different factors, cognitive, mental, psychologically, linguistically, morally, and all these things, you are kind of predisposed to see the world in a certain way, right? So then when a kind of a different point of view comes in and kind of attacks completely the whole way you see the world, it kind of, it's almost as if you feel like you're being attacked, right? All of your ideas, your beliefs, your ideologies, and so the approach that I try to give the course, it consists of 10 lectures. We already did 5, so there's five missing. It's every Sunday, 1 hour every Sunday. All the lectures are being recorded, so people can watch them whenever they want. And yeah, so the idea is, again, present the tradition in a philosophical framework. So talking about, the nature of our suffering, why is it that it's so pervasive, and what are the causes and the conditions, or to what extent, what is the scope of our conditioning, mental, biologically, and all these things that kind of predispose us to fall into all these repetitive cognitive behavioral patterns, and so that they kind of reinforce for the patterns, and that we keep in the same patterns, in the same cycle of dissatisfaction, of always feeling this lack. What are the causes and the conditions for this? And then introducing basic bumper concepts, such as the topic of impermanence, that introducing how we can have this change of mindset by trying to see this impermanence in all these things, so that our attachment can kind of become less and less. And the other half of the course is dedicated to explain karma. And again, so yeah, the karma, and but basically, again, what are these conditionings that we have that pretty much predisposes or conditions us to see the world, to react to the world in a specific ways, to create those behavioral patterns, to that those conditions that kind of shape our behavior. So trying to explain what are all those things, and what is a method that we can find to kind of change those recurrent patterns. So this is basically what the course is about.
Wonderful. And again, as you said, but just to make sure for the audience that you can still register, because you can watch the previous 5 classes. And I'm hoping that the link is being put in the main chat. And let me ask you a little more of the whole, how this fits into the whole Shenton Academy. I know Geleg Rinpoche is also teaching. I believe Professor Charles Rambo is teaching there too. You want to say a little bit about the whole Shenton Academy and that part also, please?
Yeah. So, as I said, is the academy is just started. So right now we have only 3 courses. My course, Geshe Geleg's course, which it's it is kind of a continuation of a more long course that we had been having for the past 6 years. So we're reading through a specific text, by Nyame Sherab Gyaltsen, a Tibetan scholar, philosopher, kind of master that lived in the 14th century. And so we're reviewing that text. And so we have his course as well. And then Charles Rambo, who is a professor in France, I think. He's also giving a course focused on Tibetan language. So I don't know. I mean, what are the specific dates? I mean, if someone can put the link on the chat, people can go ahead and look at it. But yeah, his course is focused on Tibetan language. I think he has. I'm not sure right now, but before he had two courses. One was to complete beginners, and then the second one was for people that already were kind of familiar to Tibetan. And yeah, but the course is dedicated to Tibetan language, to kind of understand the text and translating them. So these are the 3 courses that we have. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think the link is in the chat, but if you don't, I'm just going to mention the easier way, which is Shenten, SHENTEN.org. And if you go there, that's the main page. And if you want a little more, you can put /Shenten-Academy and you'll get the whole info. But just with Shenten.org, you could probably get to that. So yeah, hope it's fascinating. It's great to see that there's, as you said, the philosophy, then there's the continuation of the Salam, of the grounds and path text by Geshe Geleg and by Professor Charles Rambo. It's kind of not just learning Tibetan, but how to read text, right? How do we read these texts, and how that helps us in the understanding, and eventually maybe for some getting to translate as well. So yeah, this is great. I think Shenton has been great in doing these things of really thinking of training, and particularly trainings for us Westerners that may not be able to do the whole Geshe program,
Yeah,
but having different ways of really going into all these texts. So this is wonderful. So I wanted to shift a little bit to practice. You
sure.
mentioned your main practice or your main deity in terms of connection is Sipejamo, which for those who don't know, she's our main protectress in the Bön tradition, and it's a practice that we do often. Maybe most of us have it daily, and sometimes with drum. And but what are maybe you can tell us what's a what's a regular day in Tulku Jorge René's time in when you're in Nepal?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, my days are, you know, kind of boring in the sense that, I mean, you know, many people when they ask me, they are quite so intrigued and, you know, quite interesting and so on. And I always I always think that, you know, it's not, you know, that, you know, how people put it or how people imagine it. And so yeah, so when I wake up, and this is like every day, you know, for me there is no Monday, there is no Wednesday, there is no this, because I have classes every day. And you know, actually the we have holiday once a week, but it's very strange because it's like every six or every 5 days. So the holiday changes like every week. And so, you know, whenever there is a break, my teacher always tells me, oh, you know, tomorrow it's holiday. And then I go like, okay. So I never know, you know, whether it's a Monday or a Tuesday or, you know, any day of the week, which is incredible. You know, it's one of the things that I find it very, how to say, you know, like quite strange, you know, to but I like it, you know, because you don't know what day of the day, and you know, time passes so fast, and you know, you are not planning this or planning that. You're just living, right? And so I like it a lot, not knowing what day it is. And so this also helps that my routine is kind of every day is the same. You know, I wake up, I do practice, so 30 to 40 minutes. I do go to yoga, my prayers. I connect with the teachers. I take refuge, uh, kind of knowing my commitment and setting my intention very clear of why am I doing this. And then, you know, I generate bodhicitta, you know, the intention to doing all those things to, you know, to help more people. Uh, and then I do salum. And then I actually, this past few weeks, I started to do the how to say, the positions that you taught us in the last retreat in Nepal, you know, the Tunkor.
Mm-hmm.
And but most of the days the Tsalung, you know, which is for those who don't know, it's a practice through that you know, you practice through visualization, you know, through you use the body as a kind of vehicle, you know, through using the breath and the visualization and kind of for cleaning and kind of connecting more to the natural state. And then I read the whole Ngondro from the Shangshin Yinju. So this is for those who don't know, it's a small text, like 40 pages. I mean, the one I have is 40 pages, and it's called Nondro, which means like preliminary practices. And this is specific. There are a lot of different preliminary texts, right? But the one that I'm focused is the Shangshin Yinju, which covers 9 different topics. You know, such as refuge and compassion. And so I just read the whole text, and then, you know, I have breakfast, and then I read. You know, I have class in Tibetan with my teacher, and then usually after the teaching, I have lunch, and then I start translating the portion of the text that we saw that day, and then, you know, I generate questions and so on. And, you know, the rest of the day I use it completely to read in either Tibetan, but mostly in English, you know, secondary sources explaining or kind of related topics to all these things. And also, you know, from different traditions, you know, different points of view. especially because it's amazing how variegated, we can say, how
validated is a good, I know what you, I think I know what you mean.
like there is a lot of different, because most of the texts are quite obstruse, right? Quite obscure, and it can open to different interpretations, right? So you have to be careful with all those things. It's one of the things that I have noticed, as I read the secondary sources in English, that there's a lot of disagreements about interpretation, and even within Tibetan traditions, there's a disagreement within interpreting certain texts in certain ways. And so this is mostly my day, meditating 3 sessions a day. The first one, which is in the morning, it's alum, and then the other 2 are more Dzogchen kind of oriented practices, more focused to the natural state. Of course, certain people have certain predilection to certain practices. That is also the reason why there is a lot of practices, right? Some find it a bit more easy, like Shine practices, focusing with a visual image, or with a sound, or focusing on one's breath. And then you have the tantric teachings, focusing on visualization and all these things. But I've always been more fond to Dzogchen meditation, just kind of keeping in the natural state. I find it more easy because then when I visualize, it's more easy for me to start proliferating, and when Dzogchen, when I try to keep in the natural state, just in non-conceptual meditation, I find it more easy. So I try to do some integration with all the other practices. For example, I do Che the most of the time that I can. It's a practice that I like it very much. I also do Yeshuama practices, but mainly Dzogchen meditation, non-conceptual meditation. It's the one that I dedicate most of the time. And this within the meditation, right? But then all the other things, because people, when the word philosophy always, or the discipline of philosophy, it comes with presuppositions, right? And especially in the West, you always find this kind of very intellectual, kind of very conceptual proliferation, right? Like you create concepts, and then you're trying to. So it kind of seems that it involves a lot of thinking, which is supposed to be the opposite of what the meditation is trying to do, right? So many people think that it's kind of wasting time or all these things, but the way I see it is more like an integration. So for example, the things that I learning philosophically, theoretically, I use them. I kind of integrate them in my life. When I'm not in sitting in the cushion, right? When I'm kind of talking with someone, or when I'm facing a specific situation. So kind of like both. I try to integrate this the intellectually, trying to acumen my understanding more and more, so that when I face a situation, or when an emotion comes, that predisposition, and when that situation kind of triggers my predisposition to react in a certain way to a certain situation, I try to remember all this intellectual thinking, so to speak, and saying, okay, I have these predispositions, I have these tendencies, I don't need to react, I need to just realize that everything is empty, and so this is how I try to integrate these 2 things, these 2, like philosophically oriented meditation with non-conceptual meditation.
Beautiful. So I would like to ask you, actually, for you to lead us in a short practice, if you would. And I want to ask the audience, one of the things that I find that when we are guided, many times we're guided by an app or by when we're guided by a teacher, there's also the presence of the teacher. So, be able to just let go of anything else and be present for I take it as a gift of the end of the year to be able to have a practice by Tulku Jorge René. So, all yours.
Yeah, sure, we can do it. So we have, like 10 minutes?
Sure, that works.
All right. Okay, so let's just start by settling into our own posture. So just trying to, again, settle in, try to keep the body still. Try to be gradually being more aware of your surroundings, not focusing on anything in particular, just, noticing that there are those things, noticing, when a sound comes, just recognizing, not following that sound, but again, just becoming aware of all these things. Then gradually we shift the focus to our breath, breathing in, allowing 4-5 seconds for breathing. And then calmly exhaling. Then just for a few moments, just keep the attention in the breath. Feel it in your whole body, how when you inhale, your whole body kind of expands. And then as we exhale, our body kind of contracts a little bit, almost as if it were a balloon, letting the air out. And then as we exhale, just try to bring your attention to the stillness in your body. Just feeling the body more restful every time you exhale. It's like you're taking out the bag that you're carrying all day. Just letting it there. That's why you feel it in your feet, your legs, your shoulders, your hands, your arms, your chin, your eyes, your mouth, until all your body is completely resting. There is no impetus to move. It's just, allowing the body to settle in. And then, just for a moment, just rest, recognize the feeling, that sensation, that at this moment, you have nothing to do. Nowhere to go. Whatever it is that you have to do later or tomorrow, next week, just let it go. Just recognize that at this precise moment, you have nothing to do. Don't try to do anything. Don't proliferate saying that you're doing anything wrong, because we're really not doing anything. If a sound manifests, don't try to block it. Just recognize it for what it is, just an experience, fleeting experience, a fleeting moment of awareness. Don't get caught up in it. Just rest, recognizing that space, that basic awareness. That space in between thoughts. Before you get caught up in an emotion or in a thought, in a sound, just recognize it and then go back. And just rest in that space. The idea is not to block or prevent any thought from coming, emotion. These are natural manifestations of awareness, right? The idea then is to not get caught in them. Just to observe them as they are, just emotions, thoughts. Come and go. That do not define me. They are part of the full experiences that I have. That doesn't mean that I am those thoughts, those emotions. Just resting. If a thought comes, just observe it, how it came from that space. And then, if you don't get caught up in it, if you don't become it, just watch it go away. Again, the idea here is just to be aware. If a sound comes, just be aware of it. Do not follow it. If a thought comes, just be aware. Not get caught up in it. Always come back to this sensation of being aware. It doesn't matter what is happening. The only thing that matters is that you're being aware of it. Getting drift in a thought, then becoming aware that you drift. That's all we're doing. Don't try to have any expectations. Try to get a specific feeling. Remember, the idea is that we're not doing anything. We're just resting in awareness. Gradually, just bring the awareness Back to your breath. Inhaling 4 or 5 seconds in. And as you exhale again, calmly let that breath naturally leave your body. Let all those prejudice, all your clinging to a certain situation, specific people, just let it go. Okay,
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
thank you.
And this has been wonderful. I know we could have done it in Spanish, the native language for both of us, but luckily there was someone translating for us. So thank you for the translator.
Yeah, thank you.
And I know that the course, the link for Shenten has been put in the chat. So there it's for everyone. And also letting you know, reminding you that next, who's this with us?
This is our dog. Her name is Maria Antonieta.
Maria Antonieta.
So she was with me all the time right here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I wanted to remind everyone that next Saturday at 10 a.m. New York time, we start the full moon practice. So for those of you who haven't joined us before, it goes for 24 hours and we start in the US and then we pass the baton to Finland and it goes all around the world and we guide in different languages. So please, it's free. Welcome to join us at any point. And Tulku, thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. Such
Thank
a
you,
joy
Ale, for the invitation.
to be with you. And I'm really happy, actually, I have to say, that you, since we were in Nepal a month and a half ago, that you incorporated those Trungkor teachings to your practice. I'm really excited. And looking forward to seeing you again in Nepal for the retreat or the ceremony that Tulku was referring is that Yongsin Tenzin Namdak is turning 100 years old. So that's going to be in early February. On the 5th, it's going to be the consecration of the new temple. On the 6th, it's going to be his birthday. 7 and 8, a conference, and then the Geshe ceremony. And right before, from the 1st to the 4th, I believe, it's going to be long life prayers and for him. And also, anyone who wants to keep on thinking of long life for Yongdrung Rinpoche, please do, and for everyone. And again, thank you, Tulku. Thank you, Milos. Thank you, Poli. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. And this will be recorded, so if you want to share it with others, you can do that as well. Great and Happy New Year. And thanks for that beautiful gift of your meditation. It was really lovely. Muchas gracias.
Thank you all. Happy to do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you in the next talk, Ali.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the CyberSangha podcast. If you'd like to learn more about CyberSangha, visit us online at cybersangha.net.